everybody, my name is Tanya and welcome to my July wrap-up. So July was a really strange reading month for me. I read quite a few things in the first few days of the month for the Readorama Round 2 readathon, and then I just didn't finish anything for ages. Like, it took me forever to read most of what I was reading. I did read some large things in the month, but it just seemed to take me forever to get to things, and needless to say, I didn't quite get to everything on my TBR that I'd set last month, and I didn't think I would, but it's not quite as epic a failure as I suspected it was going to be at some points of the month, but I definitely didn't finish as much as I wanted to in the month, but it had to happen eventually. So the books that I read during Readorama I've already covered in my Readorama wrap-up, which I'll link down below. There were quite a number of things, shorter things that I finished in those first few days that I've already spoken about, so I'm not going to show them here, but there are 6 things that I was able to complete in the rest of the month, so I will show you those ones. So the first book that I completed after Readorama was The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter, and this is a short story collection and was a buddy read with Ellen from Ellen Reads Books, which I really enjoyed reading this one with her and hearing her thoughts on the different short stories. This is a series of quite dark fairy tale retellings. The title story, The Bloody Chamber, is by far the longest story in this collection, and it goes for 42 pages, and this volume itself is only 149, so a third of it is made up of that title story. And like Eleanor, I think I enjoyed that one the most because I think we get more of a chance to connect with the story being in longer form, although I do enjoy like really short stories as well. There was one in here that was kind of only a page and a bit long, and you know, quite shocking in its abruptness, so things like that are really interesting too, but I think I felt the most connected to that one because it was a bit longer. The Bloody Chamber was the retelling of Bluebeard, which is something that I am obviously aware of, but I don't know whether I've ever read the original story or just had different kind of sanitized versions. It's something that I really like to go back and read, especially after reading this one. So there are quite a few retellings of quite well-known fairy tales. As I said, The Bloody Chamber is a retelling of Bluebeard. There are also 2 Beauty and the Beast retellings and a couple of Little Red Riding Hood retellings, and also there's Puss in Boots in here. I found some of this to be a little bit clunky, and some of the finishings of things seemed a little bit abrupt, which I know is part of short stories. But just some of the endings of things seem to be a little bit messy and clunky compared to the rest of the writing, whereas in general Angela Carter's writing is phenomenal. I really enjoyed it, and it's really compelling and engaging, and I enjoyed it a lot, but some of it seemed to be a little bit rushed perhaps, and so maybe not of the same quality as the rest of the stories. But for the most part I did really enjoy this, and I'm intrigued to go on and read more of Angela Carter and more of her short stories. As I said, it's only around 150 pages, so it's ridiculous that it's sat on my shelf for this long, so for the push to finally pick it up, I am very grateful. The next book that I finished was another short one and another buddy read, and that was Bonjour Mistress by Françoise Sagan, and this one I read with a group of ladies, and it was really interesting to see the kind of different opinions for this one. We had people who really loved it and people who really disliked it, and others that were kind of falling in the middle, so it was a really interesting discussion hearing everybody's thoughts on this one. This one is a story of 17-year-old Cecile and her father Raymond, and together they lead quite a carefree lifestyle. Raymond often has a woman in his life for a few months, and then they disappear and a new one takes their place. Then everything changes and that carefree lifestyle is threatened when Raymond decides he wants to remarry, and Cecile does not react well to this news and to this threat to the life that she's used to leading, and things don't necessarily pan out all that well. So I fell into the category of those who really quite enjoyed this one. I did end up giving it 3 out of 5 stars, but at high 3 I thought it was really interesting and it was a quick and easy read. I felt slightly disappointed by the ending, but I found it really compelling and really enjoyable, and I'm definitely glad that I picked this one up. The next book that I completed took me a very long time, and you'll see the size of it, I suppose it's understandable, but I just seemed to be making no progress and would maybe read 30 pages a day, or maybe skip some days, and it just seemed to crawl along for a very long time. But I really did enjoy it, and that was The Crimson Petal and the White by Michelle Faber. This is another buddy read that I read with quite a large group, and again it was really interesting to hear everyone's thoughts. It just seemed to take me a very long time to get through. It is 800 something pages, and the font is not all that large, so I don't know why I'm that surprised about that fact. But as I said, I seem to put it down and not pick it up again, for all that I was really enjoying it. I think in some ways that's because it's a big novel where not a lot of action happens. There is a lot going on, but there's not a lot of action that happens with it. And while it was very interesting to kind of get descriptions of people's everyday lives as they were, it maybe wasn't the most gripping to pick it up and just devour. So while I really, really enjoyed it, I seemed to be taking it quite a slow pace, which is probably not a bad thing. But it did mean that I was spending a lot of time on this and not moving on to other things. So on the blurb and at face value, this is the story of Sugar, who is a prostitute in Victorian London, but there's really so much more going on than that. For all that I said, it's not very plot and action heavy. There's quite a large cast of characters that we're following in this one. We're following Sugar, but we're also following a man named William Rackham, who is the heir to a perfume company, and his older brother Henry, and other people of their acquaintance. We're also following William's wife Agnes, who is an incredibly fascinating character to read sections from her perspective. I don't really want to give all that much away about what plot there is, because I think it's something that should be experienced through reading it. I've been meaning to read something by Michel Faber for a long time, although I thought the one that I would start with would be Under the Skin, which I understand is going to be completely different to this one. A lot of his books seem to be quite different from the others, but I'm definitely interested to go on and read more of his work. So it seemed to take me a very long time, and I was making very slow progress. As I said, I just wasn't picking it up on some days, but I did really, really enjoy this one and would highly recommend it. Then I had another section where I didn't finish anything for ages, and again was making really slow progress on the things that I was reading, and it was a strange reading month for me. The next book I completed for the month was my audiobook for the month, and that was Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb, which is the second book in the Farseer trilogy. So I'm not going to talk about the plot of this one at all because I don't want to give away what came before. But of course Robin Hobb has been huge on BookTube lately. I've been hearing so many fantastic things about her next trilogy, Life to Traders, so it was about time that I finally moved on with the Farseer trilogy so I can move on to that one because I'm so excited to get to those. But basically this one continues to follow the story of Fitz, who we met in the first book in the trilogy, Assassin's Apprentice, and Fitz frustrated me a lot, particularly at the start of this. I just kind of wanted to slap him and shake some sense into him. And tell him to stop whining. I understand why he's that way, but he did frustrate me a little bit, especially since this is quite a big one and it's quite a slower paced book. To have him kind of constantly whinging about things gets a little bit frustrating, but I'm still really, really enjoying this series, and as I said, I'm really hoping that I can get to the third book soon so I can move on to Life to Traders and find out what all the fuss is about with those ones, because everything everybody says sounds absolutely amazing. I then picked up my Agatha Christie of the month, which this time was Towards Zero, which is one that I have never read before and doesn't have one of her regular detectives, though it does feature Superintendent Battle, who pops up here and there in some of her books. This one was really interesting in that instead of starting at the crime or at the murder of the book and then going forward from that point and the detection and the investigation of that crime, it instead starts with different people and different circumstances all moving towards the 0 point, so the point of the murder. So the book, instead of starting with that crime, is moving towards it instead. And so we're following different characters and getting different events that happen that kind of shape and lead up to 0 hour. So on the back it says, what is the connection between a failed suicide attempt, a wrongful accusation of theft against a schoolgirl, and the romantic life of a famous tennis player? And so all those things do happen to, end up having a bearing on how the crime plays out and how the solving of the crime plays out. And yeah, I found that really interesting. So at its most basic, this follows different characters that all come together as a house party, and when they get there, obviously a murder takes place, but we kind of follow those people on their journey to coming to that point. I don't really want to say any more than that because I don't want to give anything away, but no, I did not guess the whodunit. And the next book I didn't actually finish until July started. In fact, I finished it at the very early hours of this morning, and today is the 2nd. But I read the majority of it in July, and now that I've finished it before filming this wrap up, I'm going to include it in here. And that was The Fair Fight by Anna Freeman, which was another buddy read for me this month, and I really, really love this one. So I've been working on this one for quite a while as well. I was really enjoying it, but again, wasn't picking it up. And then I finished basically the entire second half last night and stayed up till after 1 AM because I just couldn't stop. And it was fantastic. So you've no doubt been seeing a lot of this one on BookTube lately, and I definitely think it is worth the hype. This one is ostensibly about female fist fighting, and of course the front cover only enforces that, but it is about so much more. So there is sections about female fist fighting, and that is an important part in this, but it also is so much wider than that. So this one is narrated by 3 different characters. We have Ruth, who is one of the female fist fighters you'll see on the front cover here. Ruth's mother is the madam of the brothel, so she and her sister Dora are raised in that brothel, and Ruth is discovered and becomes a lady fist fighter. Ruth is discovered by a man named Grenville Dyer, and so we also get sections that are narrated by George, who is a friend of Mr. Dyer, and also Charlotte, who is Mrs. Dyer. And I think I enjoyed the sections narrated by Charlotte the most. I really enjoyed Ruth, and her voice is really compelling. She talks a lot in slang and with frequent cursing, whereas Charlotte is more of a lady, and so we're getting a more refined story. So I really enjoyed Ruth's voice, but I think I enjoyed Charlotte's storyline the best. The 3 narrations do cover some of the same ground, but I really actually enjoyed it. It didn't feel like just going over the same things. It was more along the lines of we get up to a certain point in one perspective and then we pick it up and see it from another angle and kind of fill in the gaps, and then again we shift and fill in gaps that were left by that narration. So I didn't feel like it was unnecessarily going over the same ground, but just that we were getting more and more information each time we shifted perspective, and I thought that worked really, really well. I don't think I want to go into it too more than that, but I really, really enjoyed this one. It was definitely worth the hype, and I'm so glad I picked it up. And I think these characters are going to stay with me for quite a long time, particularly Charlotte, but also Ruth. I think that they're going to stick with me for quite a while. And so they're all the books that I was able to complete in July, or just into August. So there are a number of things that were on my TBR for last month that I did not get to. The one that I'm most disappointed that I didn't get to in the month is my BookTube Recommends pick for the month, and that was The Incarnations by Susan Barker. And I ran out of time and I didn't get to it, and I'm definitely going to have to make this a priority to catch up next month and read 2 BookTube Recommends books, because I don't want to fall behind on that one, and I'm really, really looking forward to getting to this. July was a weird month. So there were quite a few other things that I'd hoped to get to in July that I didn't get to, but we will move on, and hopefully August will be an amazing reading month. So these are the books that I was able to complete in July, following on from the books that I read at the start of the month for the Readorama Round 2 readathon, which again I'll link my wrap up down below if you wanted to hear more about my thoughts on that one. So if you read any of these ones, do let me know what you thought of them down in the comments, because I'm really, really interested to know, or if you've got any questions. As always, thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!